our athletes and our programs. It's really, you're making our programs run and providing quality programs for athletes. So we certainly do appreciate that. Another quick announcement that I do have, just as a reminder, on October 6th, we do have the Health Expo. That will be at the Towson Legion Hall, Post 22. Right down the street from Towson, we'll be offering 5 disciplines: healthy hearing, special smiles, fun fitness, health promotion, and strong minds. That's free not only for Special Olympics athletes, but anybody with an intellectual disability can come through, visit the health clinic, Health Expo, absolutely free. We are also providing financial assistance to area programs who would like to provide group transportation, which is a great opportunity. So if you would like to organize a bus or large passenger van to come from your area into Towson, we will absolutely provide financial assistance there. So as it will say in the area memo, please get in touch with Healthy Athletes at somd.org so we can provide that.
Hey, Jeff, can you hear me now?
I can. I just unmuted you, and that's really good timing because I was just done with the Healthy Athletes announcement. So now that Jim's on, we're going to officially start the webinar. And again, I appreciate everybody for your time this evening. As I mentioned in the email, there's not a lot here that's new. We did want to provide another opportunity to share the strategic plan with you as approved by the board, and also provide opportunities for questions. So just some housekeeping things here. We are recording this webinar, so everyone except for Jim and I will stay on mute for the whole webinar, and this will be distributed after the webinar to everybody who attended, as well as area directors and area director support. At the end, we will have time for questions. So through GoToWebinar, you can click the raise your hand, and if your hand is raised, I will unmute you. You can ask a question, and then I'll mute you again when Jim answers. And if you have a follow-up, we can certainly unmute you again, or you can choose to type in your question if you don't want to be unmuted. So I will leave that up to you. So I will turn it over to Jim. And Jim, I think I'll click through the slides. So when you're ready to change slides, just let me know. And
okay.
The floor is yours. Yep.
That's great. Why don't we just go to the first slide, which should be a table of contents.
Sure.
All right. First of all, thanks, Jeff, for organizing this, and thanks for everybody for joining this evening. As Jeff indicated, there's not a lot that's new. When we shared this at the area leadership meeting, there were certainly some gaps, and so those have been filled. So, for example, if we go through the table of contents, the messages were not present at the time of our leadership meeting. They obviously, we've gathered that information. So one of the things that we felt was important was to have some representation from key stakeholders within the organization. So we lead with an athlete message. We've got a message from a parent who also happens to be a board member. That's Natasha Moulton-Levy. Our athlete, Elena Camacho, serves as the chair of our athlete congress and has been very active, not only as an athlete in multiple sports, but also on the leadership side, both with the Congress and also from a healthy athletes perspective. She's representing her fellow athletes on a global committee as a health ambassador as well. So we've got an introductory message from Elena, one from Natasha, John Noonan's the chairman of our board, and then there's a brief message from me. So that's basically the entry point to the strategic plan. And then you can read through this. I mean, you've got an introduction, overview, executive summary, strategic direction, context. One of the things, and so Jeff, do me a favor, just advance so they can, folks can just see, while this is really text heavy, They are quick hit messages, so they're designed to be easy to consume in a fairly short time frame, but hopefully touch upon some key points. So those are the kind of the welcome messages. And if you go to the next slide, Jeff, this is an introduction that provides some context. So for anybody who's not affiliated with Special Olympics, this has more value relative to setting the table, relative to the current situation where we are, and then provide some context relative to where we want to go as it relates to the next slide. So if you go to the next slide for me, Jeff, this is an executive summary that really provides a deeper understanding of how we came to put together the strategic plan. You'll notice in the second paragraph, growth, quality, sustainability, and innovation are highlighted, and you'll also notice that in the footer, those elements are identified as the guiding principles that we have really focused on. One of the things that evolved in the process was we had really focused on growth, quality, and sustainability, and through the interaction in particular with you all as leaders of the local programs and the community-based opportunities that our athletes receive because of you, it became apparent that if we're going to have success here, that we need to think with innovation, right? So that we're thinking in an innovative manner to come up with new solutions that enhance all the good work that you all have done, that have advanced the program to where it is today, and provide us with an opportunity to do the things we need to do in order to reach and include more athletes without compromising the quality of the experience that your athletes are currently receiving thanks to your leadership. So go to the next slide for me, Jeff. Thank you. So the next two slides provide context for the strategic direction. It talks about where we currently are. It talks a little bit about the big, hairy, audacious goal and the thinking behind that in the context of the number of people within the state that have an intellectual disability and the potential for us to serve more. It talks a little bit about the interaction we had with some other programs through this concept of SONA Advanced last November, and just walks people through the process that ultimately resulted in producing the strategic plan. So Jeff, if you go to the next page. And then it continues there. So, and then these next couple of slides provide a connection to some of the work that we've done over the last really 3 to 4 years since I've been here. So in 2013, for those of you who were in your leadership positions, most of you, you'll recall we talked about the big, hairy, audacious goal. We identified 6 overarching goals. Jeff, if you go to the next slide for me. I've got one more slide, so stay here with me, Jeff, and then I'll so here what you'll see is the vision framework that ties us to the Special Olympics Global Strategy. It introduces the big, hairy, audacious goal. It talks about our core purpose. All of these elements are things that you've seen in the past, as well as the key assumptions on the slide previous. And then if you go to the next slide, Jeff, it outlines the 6 overarching goals. And so the key here is that we're not abandoning anything relative to the vision that we identified 3 years ago in 2015. We're making sure we stay connected to that, but we're providing more depth and direction in the context of the strategic plan. And that's really outlined in those 3 elements under the 3-year strategic plan framework. Those won't be new to you. Those are similar to what we talked about in terms of building capacity, smart growth through schools, and then the execution of 2 to 3 pilot programs in the community-based programs with our areas in a way that enables us to test ideas without making a deep commitment before we understand what the opportunities are and what potential pitfalls may be as well. And one thing that I'll kind of underscore here is that as we look at 2 to 3 pilot programs, it may be more. These aren't full-blown pilot programs. We may test concepts. So, for example, we're looking at testing athlete leadership components in Western Maryland from Frederick West. We'll be talking to the area leadership there about options and opportunities for us to take our athlete leadership program to a new level in those geographic areas, but to do it in a way that's collaborative. So we're not going to come in and say, here's what we're doing, here's how we're doing it. We're going to have conversations and identify opportunities that are viewed as mutually beneficial. We certainly don't want to impose ourselves on anyone with these pilot programs. So we're looking from a thematic standpoint. We're looking at things like athlete leadership, working with Mike to identify areas where we might test some league models in some team sports like soccer and/or basketball. We will be working with a geographic area where we test the concept of bringing 3 county programs together to function in a regional model with a leadership group that comes together with representation from the 3 counties, but where we think we can derive some benefits in terms of economies of scale, where there's some efficiencies built in there that I think can be beneficial in that geographic area. So more to come on that as we roll this out, and after we have conversations with the target groups for those opportunities. And if you have an interest in participating in a pilot program, absolutely let Jeff know, and we'll talk to you about what those opportunities might be. If you have a specific idea in mind, one of the things we're looking at is identifying an area or two where we can go and work in deeper collaboration on fundraising. We've ventured into some things with Montgomery County, and we'll be talking to them a little bit more about some extended opportunities there as well. But we're certainly open to working throughout the state where there are opportunities to be leveraged and taken advantage of. The one thing I did want to take a bit of a deeper dive on, and that is the forecasting athlete growth component at the bottom of this slide. This is new information as it relates to kind of definitive numbers, and we felt like it was important through our discussions and based on feedback from you as well as other stakeholders to address over the next 3 years what growth might look like. So, and you can see the numbers, but what I would really point out is on the community program that the numbers are flat, right? So if you look at across the board right now, of the 7,782 athletes participating, 2,587 are in our local area community-based programs. 3,293 are in traditional school programs. So the majority of those would be identified in Baltimore City and Prince George's County. And then we've got 1,624 in the interscholastic unified sports programs. For the purpose of where we are and the focus of this strategic plan, those numbers are represented as flat over the next 3 years. So there is no net growth. Now, we understand that there's attrition and there's new athletes, but what we're saying is we're not going to push growth in any of those 3 areas of our current programming. If they grow organically, that's fine, and we've seen and experienced some organic growth certainly over the last 5 years. But that's not our focus over the next 3 years. Our focus over the next 3 years will be to grow. Any program will come through our smart growth within the schools, and you'll see here that is predominantly through our young athletes program, and that's based on the momentum that we've experienced here over the last 12 to 18 months, particularly under Mackenzie Irvin's dedicated focus and leadership in that area, and some of the success stories that she's had, and some of the agreements that we've secured, particularly recently in the last 6 months. And then you'll see a little bit of growth through what's referred there as additional pilots. Those are could come from league play. It could come from working with an area where whether it's league play or a concerted targeted effort to identify whether it's group homes or day programs for adults, some specific recruiting strategies to bring on new athletes in the adult population as a means of testing those strategies and seeing how we could do that in a way that effectively integrates those athletes again without compromising the current experience of the athletes that our current athletes are experiencing. So if we progress along the lines of the growth that has been charted here in this table, we would be over 10,000 athletes at the end of 2021, and we would have the idea is that we learn lessons that enable us to sustain those models. And if you look at the school models, if we have that growth in the young athletes program and we position ourselves to sustain programs through the elementary and middle schools and continue the interscholastic unified sports programs, that then gets you to the point where of what we've talked about, where roughly 80% of our growth in new athletes over the next 7 years leading up to 2025 would come through our school program. So that was a point that I wanted to highlight. That is additional information that we really thought would be important and valuable to share. So I'm going to stop and see if there's any questions that anybody might have with regard to those numbers before I go on to the balance of the plan. Jeff, are there any questions that have been raised?
None that are typed, but just as a reminder, if you do have a question, raise your hand on not your actual hand, on GoToWebinar, and I will unmute you to ask questions.
All right, so we're going to, and if you think of a question between now and the end of the presentation, just by all means, you raise it. And if you don't care to ask a question while we're on this presentation, but want to follow up with Jeff or myself afterwards, that's absolutely encouraged as well. So go to the next slide for me, Jeff. So this starts to add a little bit of depth to the three focus areas, the three initiatives under the plan. And you'll find this to be consistent with what was previously presented also. So I'm not going to go through each bullet point. One thing that I will say is we do have more detail that we had considered including in this, but we pulled out. There were 3 additional slides that elaborated even more on these initiatives. And the feedback that we got was that's more detail than is necessary relative to the kind of the public consumption of this. People can read through this and get a sense of the direction and have a really good feel for the direction in which we're going. The additional information is much more valuable to each of the individual staff who have responsibilities and who will outline an individual annual plan with specific objectives, a series of metrics to which they'll be held accountable and their performance will be measured. So again, you'll see as we continue to move forward in working with you, you'll see more detail, particularly those involved with the pilot programs. But this just provides that snapshot that I think helps give people a grasp of the direction in which we're going and the areas of focus for each of those initiatives. So go to the next slide for me, Jeff. And here's where we start to wrap up the strategic plan, because what we wanted to do was identify the resources that were required in order to help us execute the strategic plan. And one of those elements is financial resources. And this table in here is, you'll notice that the header on this proposed SOMD financial forecast for presentation and strategic plan still to be approved by the board. So the board, as Jeff alluded to in the introduction, the board at our meeting 10 days ago approved the strategic plan with one caveat, and that is that we needed to provide them with a financial forecast that we felt effectively represented what we would forecast for both expense and revenue trends over the next 3 years. So this is where we currently are. This is going to be presented to the executive committee within the next 2.5 weeks for their approval. Well, actually, to the executive committee within the next week, and then within the next 2.5 weeks to the full board for their approval. But what I would highlight here is that within the expense forecast, there's nominal growth, and that's designed to allow for some investment in our pilot programs, along with some capital expenditures that are of value in terms of improving the program, along with from a compensation standpoint, the ability to, as we evaluate staff performance, provide merit pay increases where it's appropriate. So that's where you see on the expense side. Now, on the revenue side, you'll see that the revenue outpaces the expenses in terms of forecast. So the idea there is to create a surplus of revenue at year end that would enable us to start to build up a short-term operating reserve. Ultimately, we'd like to get to a 6-month operating reserve that would enable us to really be financially stable with the ability to weather any potential financial storm that we might face. The other thing that I would point out on this is the distinction between the annual state expense forecast and the annual area expense forecast. One of the things that we're going to be doing going forward is in our public-facing conversations, we will be representing the full budget. We have historically, and you've seen this in presentations to you when George has come on and talked about where we are with the budget. He talks about the state budget and he talks about the area budget. We'll continue to budget in those two spaces, but when we do we have our audited financials and the Form 990 that we submit to the IRS. That is representative of all the expenses and revenue that's generated for the organization, and we want that to be the story. So when we start talking to prospective corporate partners or donors, they will be given the full picture of the annual of the state and area budget in the combined form that you see. So as I said, the forecast of the revenue exceeds the expense budget, so it's not a balanced budget from that perspective. It's designed to generate revenue. The other thing that I would point to is that you'll see increases in the area program revenue forecast. Those numbers are consistent with the 3-year trends that have been exhibited through the area revenue over the last 3 years. So it's not. Some of it may come from some of our pilot programs and more collaboration, which we certainly want to achieve and to which we're committed. But I think the key there is, again, it's relatively modest growth. You'll see the cumulative on the percent at the bottom line. You'll see the percentage year-over-year growth at kind of an average of about 5.5%. And you'll see the raw dollars increasing from roughly the 212 forecasted at the year end in 2018 up to 429 in 2021. The hope is that we're successful beyond that. So the idea here was to have something that was a little bit of a reach, but not so much that we would get to the end of each of those years and look back and say, why didn't we reach our forecast? We think that in working with Nate to put together the revenue numbers, we have a level of confidence that we, with the team that we've put together, can achieve this type of growth over the next 3 years. So the rest of the resource requirements include human resources, and you're fully capable of reading that, so I won't talk you through that. But go to the next slide for me, Jeff. Human resources continue. We talk about technology here. We want to continue to improve the IT infrastructure. In terms of physical resources relative to where we might be located, we're we'll give consideration to potential regional offices. We've got our current lease is up in 3 years. We don't believe that we're going to be in a position to move all staff at that point. So we're open to opportunities that make sense to have some decentralization of resources, whether it's by deploying current staff out in the field, or if we hire new staff, having them in the field, working more closely with the volunteers on the ground. And then there's a brief statement there relative to the impact on the resource impact. So I'm pretty sure that's our last slide, Jeff, but I just want to make sure. Okay, so this may be our last slide. So this provides the timeline and how we're measuring progress. I talked about individual goals. Individual plans for each staff person under the measuring progress. You can read through those and get a sense of how we're going to be accountable and try to get into effective rhythms and including you all in the reporting of progress. So we feel like that's important, and the hope is that we'll get into those rhythms, and those efficiencies will make us more effective and enhance all of our ability to effectively execute against a strategic plan. One of the things that we have talked about, and one of the reasons why we're having this call tonight is Jeff has worked on setting up some town hall meetings so we can go out and take to a larger group of people. We wanted to make sure that you had this in hand before we go out in any of those environments, so that you can A, be aware of it, B, address any questions in advance of that. So it would be helpful to us in anticipating what we might engage in, the type of conversations that we'll engage in. But we also want to make sure that you have an opportunity to provide feedback so that we can respond and make any clarifications. The final thing I'll say here is we view this as dynamic. So we're gonna on an annual basis review and kind of adjust as necessary. The annual plans are going to be critical for us. So we want to get tactical as quickly as possible through our annual plans and have those plans really feed into the success that we're looking at relative to those 3 areas, and again position us for growth in a way that doesn't compromise the quality that the athletes are currently achieving, and ultimately reinforce the mission of quality sports training and competition for our athletes. So I'll stop talking. Jeff, are there any identified questions?
No writing questions, but now's a great time if anybody does have questions. If you want to write those in, or if you want to put your hand up through GoToWebinar by clicking the little hand that you see. I can unmute your line and we can answer any questions that you have.
And Jeff, I would say too, we obviously went through that. I went through that pretty quickly. If there's points that you felt like we've talked about that maybe I missed, or that you would want to also reiterate or emphasize, I would, by all means, please share that.
Sure.
Well, look, I certainly, we don't need to keep people on, and we felt like this could be a quick presentation. We wanted to make sure we got it out to you. We want to provide some context for it. It's a lot of information, so in terms of this is text heavy. And I completely understand that, but we think the information in here is valuable in providing a context for the direction in which we want to go over the next 3 years. So what I would suggest is, feel free to take the opportunity to go through this in greater detail. And if you have any questions, please follow up with Jeff or myself. If you want to schedule time to have a conversation, by all means, we can do that. If you have an email, if you want to send it by email and it's just an easy response, we can handle that as well.
Right. And one question did just come up about getting a copy of the strategic plan. So we'll be circulating this along with the recording of the webinar, so everybody has both the hard copy as well as Jim's explanations page by page. So you'll receive both of those. And then another question just came in, and it's on a few lines, so it's going to be odd as I read it. The pilot programs that are listed as operational as of December 2018, are they already in progress, or are they just getting rolled out? So that's a great question. So pilot programs are being identified now. When we talk about operational by December, it's mostly that we've identified and we have the go ahead there. So we're not necessarily going to have the new athlete leadership model set up and functional by December, and it's kind of rocking and rolling. The idea is to have what we're doing identified, where we're doing it identified, and some tactics in place that it can move forward in 2019. But I also want Jim to answer that to make sure I answered that.
Yeah, no, look, I think that's right. It's amazing how quickly the weeks passed, and the fall season is extremely busy with regard to the activity that is currently going on. So we're sensitive to that, and so we wanted to provide enough lead time in order to meet with the parties who will be involved, the people who will be involved. So you may see some of these that start before December 18th, and we may be rolling some of these out after the first of the year based on the volume and our ability to effectively service them. The most important thing from our perspective as we commit to these pilot programs is the ability to, once we identify the groups with which we're going to work, and that they've made a commitment, that we are able to live up to our end of that commitment too in collaboration. So we want to make sure that we set the table and the expectations in a way that everybody understands, so that when, as Jeff described, as we do start to engage, we can do it in a way where we move forward effectively. So we certainly have conceptualized ideas, and what we needed to get the board solidly behind this. The timing of it is really good because it coincides not only with our planning, but the planning of the area programs and the budgeting process. And so it was logical for us to get, be in a position by the end of the year where we can really go at it in a meaningful way to finish up the year without a huge budget impact, and take advantage of that time after the fall seasons are over, and then roll into the new year and new budget year in full force.
Sure. And just to echo one of the things that Jim mentioned, if you have ideas for pilot initiatives or concepts that you would like to try, certainly bring those up. While we're going to be focused, on this December 2018 timeframe on some of the things that we see as opportunities, don't take that as a cutoff to, end conversation on these ideas. We are certainly, we love to hear your ideas, how you see us being impactful in your own community, how we might partner on pilots in your own area. So don't take that December 2018 as a cutoff for ideas. Innovation is in the strategic plan, and we want to see that as much as possible. Another question came in about schools. So the question is, are you reaching out to all school systems to help with growth since we are not already in all of the counties?
Okay, so two things. One, I'd like to reinforce your point about we're not in a finite time frame as it relates to these pilots. In fact, I would envision that over the course of the next 3 years, we'll introduce some new pilot programs in conjunction with new annual plans. So as we, to your point about the innovation, as we continue to evolve and innovate, we may identify new opportunities. So by all means, as you look at where you are within your particular area program and some of the things that you're looking at, this is going to be fluid. So at any point that you have an idea, please bring it up. with regard to the schools, one of the things that we've really focused on there is the concept of smart growth. So to the point in the question, we're in 21 of 24 school systems. Interestingly enough, McKinsey has identified Howard County for a young athletes program. Howard County is one of the three where they don't do interscholastic unified sports at the high school level, but they've agreed to introduce the young athletes program in some early childhood environment. So we are open to opportunities in the systems where we're currently not active, Baltimore County and Harford County being the other two. Having said that, I would say our focus is, notwithstanding what we experienced with Howard County, I would say we're looking for opportunities within school systems where we can create that continuum of experience, right? So, but I would say that if there's opportunities, if you identify opportunities within school systems, certainly bring them to our attention and we'll work on that. I don't think anything is completely off the table here. The key for us is being able to effectively manage the opportunities. And I'm excited because I think there's some energy out there, and there may be more opportunities than we can actually fully take advantage of, which on the one hand is a challenge, but it's encouraging to me that there's enthusiasm for what we're trying to do here. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, and then just another, not really a question, but an idea came in, pilot idea, bowling during a weekday for group homes. And so those are great ideas that if you have those things, let us know. I will follow up with this individual, certainly about that. You know, our daytime programs that we offer in Baltimore City Public Schools, we do offer bowling. We also have a swimming program and an ice skating program that are hugely popular. So those are the types of things that as county programs want to put up their hand to try some of those things out, we will absolutely, you know, see what we can do there, partner with you, work with our sports department to see what they can offer as well. So great idea there. We'll definitely continue the conversation. So that's all of the questions that have come in. Let me just make sure that nobody's hand is, I believe we answered all of the questions that are listed below. So I just want to do one final thanks to everybody for your time this evening and all the energy that you put into our programs. This is a really exciting time for Special Olympics Maryland. I think we're going to see a lot of growth, a lot of really innovative programming that's going to provide just a fantastic experience for both our athletes, our volunteers, and our family members. So thanks for all that you're doing. Thanks for your energy behind what we're getting started, and I'm looking forward to working with everybody. So I'll turn it over to Jim for any last thoughts.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you and echo your sentiments. Really appreciate everybody's commitment. You really are the heart and soul of the program when it comes to giving our athletes the opportunities that they deserve. So thanks so much. And again, for taking the time on a summer evening to be on a call. Really appreciate that as well. So without any further ado, we'll let you guys get on with your evening. And Jeff will be in touch as we continue to roll out with town halls and the area leadership meeting this fall. You'll be seeing more details on that.
Great. Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
Thank you.